in accordance with Rule 37 of
the participation of Ukrainian, the United States will continue to surge security assistance to Ukraine, including artillery, air defense, armored vehicles, and other needed capabilities and munitions. And we will announce additional security assistance for Ukraine in the days to come. Because ultimately, supporting Ukraine in Congress and beyond it cannot be and should not be a partisan issue. Standing up for democracy and human rights is above petty politics and outlasts any one leader or term. And so, in its desperation, the Kremlin has turned to the DPRK, first for arms and now for manpower. At least 10,000 soldiers, sent first to eastern Russia and now to the far western Kursk oblasts bordering Ukraine, have begun engaging in combat operations with Russian forces. It is a move without modern precedent. Not in over 100 years has Russia welcomed foreign troops onto its soil. And it's one in blatant violation of UN Security Council Resolution 1718, 1874, 2270, resolutions Russia agreed to only a few years ago. Colleagues, these are the actions of a rogue state. And so rather than try and justify the unjustifiable, Russia simply lies. 1,001 days ago, Russia's representative told us to our face there would be no invasion. As the world watched live broadcasts of Russian forces and tanks crossing into Ukrainian territory and Russian missiles raining down on Kyiv, he continued to insist in this council there was nothing to see here. The lies continued. We were told that no North Koreans were deploying through Russia. Now North Koreans are fighting on Russia's front lines under the command of the Russian military. All the while, this chamber has been flooded with slurs and baseless accusations against Ukraine's democratically elected leaders.
Есть определенный символизм в том, что именно наши британские коллеги.
In other words, 50 days after the start of the special military operation, where the losses in the Ukrainian armed forces were not yet that significant, the hostilities had every chance of ending. If it hadn't been for the interference of the British Prime Minister, who convinced Zelensky that he should continue fighting, that he would have Western support and weaponry, and he will thus be able to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia. And the British Prime Minister and his accomplices were very much interested in such a defeat. And so as to explain this kind of shift to Ukrainian and public opinion, the British Special Forces and mass media participated in staging a crude provocation in Buda there after the Russian forces' withdrawal. People's corpses were brought and arranged on the streets there. And the origin, the real reason for death, no one bothered to explain to us, despite the fact that we asked for it several times. In other words, it turns out that the UK pushed the regime towards its inevitable defeat to precipitating its choice for confrontation with Russia.
On the one hand, the fighting on the ground continues unabated, the humanitarian crisis deepens, and the spillover effects of the conflict are becoming more severe. Both parties to the conflict remain fixated on winning by force, persisting in launching large-scale attacks against each other, with the intensity of the fighting escalating in recent days. On the other hand, the international community, while addressing the Ukraine crisis, has increasingly turned its focus towards finding a resolution through negotiations and advocating for peace. From Asia and Africa to Europe and the Americas, from the south to the north, and from the east to the west, the global aspiration for peace is growing stronger, and the call for a peaceful resolution is becoming louder. People around the world are now more united than ever in demanding an end to the violence, urging all parties to prioritize diplomacy and cooperation. The overwhelming desire for peace is becoming not only a moral imperative, but a practical necessity for the stability of the world.
1,000 days since the war on Ukraine started, it is simply deplorable that we continue to witness the loss of human lives, mass displacement, and destruction of critical infrastructure. The war is also shaking the international order. Indeed, the aggression of a permanent member of the Security Council against a neighboring sovereign state tramples the fundamental principles of the UN Charter: sovereign equality, territorial integrity, and refrain from the use of force. In addition, we see the global non-proliferation regime underpinned by the NPT precariously eroding. Since the war broke out, Russia, which led global efforts to establish the current non-proliferation regime, has heightened its nuclear rhetoric, suspended the New START Treaty, and de-ratified the CTBT. The ongoing war also represents a blatant violation of the Budapest Memorandum, in which Ukraine agreed to join the NPT as a non-nuclear weapon state in exchange for security assurances that have now been disregarded by a signatory state.
A 1,000 days. Tomorrow marks 1,000 days of Putin's barbaric, full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Over the weekend, we saw the latest brutality with the biggest aerial attack on Ukraine since August, killing and injuring dozens of civilians. It was designed not only to kill Ukrainians, but to take out, effectively, Ukraine's power infrastructure and to cause blackouts. Putin wants to plunge Ukraine into darkness. But today, standing here with my friend, the Ukrainian Foreign Minister, Andrei Sybiha, the UK is showing our support to Ukraine is ironclad. If he succeeds in Ukraine, he will tip the world beyond the tipping point that we are on, a point where the principles of the UN Charter, self-determination, territorial integrity, and international law are lost and there's no meaning. So this is a grim milestone, and I'm here at the United Nations to say to member states, unless Putin fails, the wars of conquest will be back. Unless Putin fails, our faith in international law will never return. Unless Putin fails, all of our borders will not be safe. The Kremlin is now turning to Iran for ballistic missiles. It's turning to North Korea for foot soldiers. These are dangerous escalations that show, frankly, how desperate Putin has become.
I thank my friend Secretary Lamy for setting Russian aggression as a priority for the UK presidency. This global threat demands global response. When I departed for New York, Russia undertook one of the most massive air attacks against Ukraine. With my wife and children, we had a sleepless night, just like thousands of other Ukrainian families. Tomorrow marks 1,000 days since Russia's full-scale invasion. In total, Russian aggression against Ukraine has already lasted more than 10 years. I would like to remind this. The longer Ukraine can strike, the shorter the war will be. And our Ukraine's position has always been clear. We have a full right to strike military targets on the territory of Russia. It is our legitimate right, and it will save our lives of our civilians. It could have very positive impact on the situation on the battlefield.
Look, let me just say that I don't want to be drawn on the use of long-range missiles, and that is because it risks operational security, and it can only play into the hands of Putin, and I will do nothing to play into the hands of Putin. There are now 10,000 North Korean troops in Russia, linking the Indo-Pacific and the Euro-Atlantic. As we meet here in the UN, 1,000 days into this war, none of us would have considered such a transshipment of troops. This is a major, major escalation. And so I repeat what Prime Minister Starmer has said since coming to office. We must stand with Ukraine, put Ukraine in the strongest possible position, and that is what the United Kingdom will continue to do. And of course, we continue to work very, very closely with President Biden. That's why I was with Tony Blinken last week meeting in Brussels.
David Kattenberg with Monto Weiss. Russia.